We lit all of the shots in this video using a single light. With a little planning and experimenting, you'll find that a single light can be used in a fair few different situations. We'll take a look at some of them in this video, which will hopefully help you in your own work and give you some things to think about when only using a single lighting unit, whether that be by necessity or by choice. For each setup, we used the Godox SL152. You can find a link to the SL152 in the video description and comments. So let's take a look at the first shot, where we cut from a nighttime look to a morning look. This is an extremely simple setup. We had our single Godox SL152 outside the room, reflector dish attached, firing through a bay of windows to represent some sort of moonlight, or it could even work as a streetlight. Inside, we used the curtains that were already in the room to control where the light was falling, with the window frame helping us to break the light up a little bit further, creating these window-shaped swathes of light onto parts of our subject and sofa, revealing certain sections of the scene. You might also notice that we've retained some detail in the shadowed areas of the image, as they aren't pitch black. When you blast a bright, uncontrolled, single source of light into a room like this, you're going to get light spilling around and bouncing off of surfaces, filling in your shadows and acting as fill light, especially if you have lighter coloured walls. This worked to our advantage, as having some detail in our shadows gave us a richer, more believable image, as opposed to darker shadows with no detail. This also helped massively with our transition to morning, where we used the exact same lighting setup, but took the colour grade toward a warmer look, and pushed up some of those filled in shadows, to better convey the scenario of sun shining through the window. It's worth noting that we do lose some control over our image shooting with one light. If we had controlled our light into a tighter beam, reducing the fill in the room, and added in our own fill light with a second light, we would have had much more flexibility and control over our light and shadow ratios. So we could have added something in the window to add some more shape and interest to the light, like how the ornaments in the window are creating these shadows on the arm of the sofa. But we decided to keep things a bit more direct, just to demonstrate how a hard light source on its own can still work effectively in an image with just a little bit of shaping. A similar point between the night and morning looks. We could have changed the angle of the light between shots, or changed from a soft to a hard light source to demonstrate the time differences and characteristics of our off-camera light sources better. But we stuck with the exact same setup, just to show how versatile a single light can be, working for either situation. This sort of one light setup can be where the camera you're shooting with comes into play, with dynamic range and exposure latitude affecting how you can expose your images, whilst retaining detail and keeping noise levels manageable. Most cameras these days produce images with decent enough room to push or pull in post. But while you might be able to get away with pushing detail out of the shadows under these lighting ratios on one camera, you might not be able to on another. Always experiment and figure out where and how you can push your camera with situations like these. Getting to know your gear is a very important part of filmmaking, especially if you're using similar setups for everything you film. For our second setup, of our subject sat at a table, backlit by the mid-morning sun, we once again placed our Godox unit outside of the window, reflector dish attached. But this time, in the shot, partly obscured by the blinds we already had available. When using only one lighting unit, it's good to remember that you can also utilise natural ambient lighting that can already be available, with a little planning. Here we shot on an overcast day, but this sort of thing would also work on a clear day, providing the sun wasn't in a conflicting position with our own light. We used the available daylight for a more realistic look. If we had just shot using one light at night time, that's all the shot would have looked like, a light outside a room at night, which wouldn't have been appropriate as a morning sunlight look, and it would also be very obvious that we'd used a light. We had the light positioned on a boom arm in such a way so that we wouldn't accidentally catch a view of the light stand through the window, and so that the light was in the general area of the sky, where the sun would be. How we framed our shot also helped with this. We also overexposed to help the light blend with the sky better, disguising the fact that the light was actually relatively close to the window and not 150 million kilometers away, like the sun would be. You may also notice that our shadows aren't completely dark, as our light is bouncing off the walls in the room, providing some fill to our shadows and making the light in the scene more realistic. By adding our light into a situation that already has natural skylight, along with all of the other elements we just mentioned, to blend it into the scene, we have a motivated, realistic looking backlight, hiding in plain sight. For the close-up of our subject's face, we adjusted the blinds for some narrower streaks of light and shadow, but we decided to move our light a little further back across the garden so that it could shine more evenly through the blinds, creating a more realistic pattern of light and shadow, and more accurately representing how the sun would be shining through the blinds. Once again, using the already existing daylight from our overcast day helped to add a sense of realism to our shot, as our scene is being lit by both the sky and our lighting unit, similar to the way the real sun and sky work together to light the environment. We warmed both of the shots up in the grade, but to make this even more realistic, we could have added a lighter strength CTO gel to our light, to better represent the temperature difference between the sun and sky, as the sun will be a warmer temperature the lower it appears in the sky. Just a quick leeway to remind you that you can grab my 21-minute color grading tutorial from my website, detailing the process of grading 2 cinematic looks in DaVinci Resolve for just £8, along with free practice DNG files so you can grade along with the video. And if you're looking at selling your own digital products, or even just looking at building a website, check out Zyro. With an e-commerce plan, you can upload and sell digital products up to 25 gigabytes in size, and manage your Facebook, Instagram, or Amazon stores all in one place. Online commerce has been an especially important element to my own income for the past year as a freelance video creator, as I'm sure it has been for many freelancers and small businesses, and Zyro has been very easy to work with, allowing me to make a fully customizable site and store using an easy and intuitive drag and drop system, without having to know anything complicated about website building. Websites made with Zyro are also fast loading, which can help to increase your search engine optimization and have your page rank higher on search engines. If you're looking at building a site or store, and you'd also like to support my channel, click on the link in the video description or use the code ROBELLIS, and you can get up to 89% off with my deal on Zyro's 1-year, 2-year and 4-year premium plans, along with a free domain for a year. For our third setup, we utilised the natural light of an overcast day once again for our background, in the back room, whilst only using our single Godox unit to shape the light in the front room where our subject was sat. The room had a bay of windows behind the camera, which made the lighting in the scene very flat, so we closed the curtains and darkened the room. We had a mirror hanging on the wall in the background, which was reflecting a large window in the back room, so we decided to use the window light in this reflection as a motivation for the scene's lighting. One quick thing to think about here is colour temperature. We want our lighting to match the colour temperature of the overcast day outside, so that it appears to be lit by the same source. There's a few ways to measure colour temperature, but we went with the cheapest option and used an inexpensive app from the Play Store, which uses your phone's camera to get a rough reading of the colour temperature by determining the white balance of the light falling onto a white surface. So from our cloudy day outside, we were getting a reading of 6,490 Kelvin. We wanted to bounce our Godox light into some muslin material for our key, just to the right of our subject. All we had to hand was unbleached muslin. Now, unbleached muslin in particular adds some warmth to whatever light we bounce from it. So our daylight balanced Godox unit would start off warmer than our cloudy background light, then get even warmer when bounced from the unbleached muslin. Sure enough, our colour temperature app is coming in at 5,460 Kelvin from the bounced light. So to fix the difference in colour temperature between the two sources, we added a 1/4 CTB gel in front of our light. With the CTB cooling down our light source, our app now reads 6,490 Kelvin, which is an exact match to our natural overcast background light. I wouldn't put too much stock into the complete accuracy of these readings, but it'll be a close enough match. Due to the spatial constraints of the room, we had to put the Godox pretty close to the muslin material, which created quite a small, bright hotspot. As the muslin was already quite close to the subject, this made for quite a punchy light on the face, with a faster fall off into shadow. And whilst the size of our bounce light source does match up nicely with our motivation, it doesn't quite fit the scene. It looks a bit saucy, like it's obvious that we have a light on our subject. So what we want to do is add some fill light to wrap the light around the face and create a more fitting look. And we also want to reduce the punchiness of our key a little. But how can we do both of these things with just the one light? We placed a mirror between our light and muslin material at such an angle that it was reflecting our light back onto another, larger stretch of muslin, just to the left of our camera. This not only provided us with fill to our shadows, wrapping the light around the face better, but with the mirror, we were also blocking some of that bright hotspot we had on the muslin previously, which meant that our key was coming from a slightly more indirect light source, removing that punchiness from before that didn't quite fit the scene. This worked well, but there's still a few things we can tweak. One thing we could improve was to introduce some negative fill to the left of our subject, to cut out some of the light bouncing off the wall on this side, and shape the light falling on the face better, making for a more dynamic look, while retaining the softness of the light. It can be subtle, but a little negative fill can really help to add some dimensionality to your image. We'd also like to push up the level of our fill slightly, but the issue with reflecting the light from the mirror is that we lose control of how much light is being reflected. We can't adjust the power of our light, as it would change the exposure of our key and disturb the balance in the scene. And we're in such close quarters to the light and muslin, we could only really put the mirror in this particular spot. And while the reflected light onto the muslin did the job, it would have been nicer for our fill to be a little brighter. So in post, we made a simple power window in Resolve and tracked it to the fill side of the face. From there, we just raised the exposure slightly for a better level of fill. Now, we could have done this before we implemented the fill light, but we wouldn't have had that base level of fill to work from. So we'd still have this harsher fall off into shadow. We'd be more likely to introduce noise, pushing up the darker shadows. And not to mention that hotspot punchiness. So although we may have used some post-production trickery to get this fill level to where we wanted it, we put the work in initially to get it to the point where we were able to have that kind of flexibility with the image. Remember, planning is key when using natural light. Try to plan your shoots so that you're not battling against the fading light of a late afternoon or evening, as your ambient light levels can quickly get darker and your colour temperature cooler, and it'll be a struggle to keep up when trying to match your own lighting to these changing elements. But if you time things right, you can use fading natural light along with a single light. In part 2 of our little one light series, we'll take a look at how we lit these 3 other shots. And, like this video, go over some of the challenges you can face when only using one light, as well as a few ways to think about how natural light works in relation to your own artificial lighting. I use Artlist for music in my YouTube videos and ArtGrid for stock footage. You can find links in the description and comments to get an extra 2 months free when you sign up for either Artlist or ArtGrid. Grab my 21-minute colour grading tutorial at robelliscinematography.com/downloads for just £8, and get up to 89% on yearly plans for your website with my Zyro deal, using the link in the description or by using the code ROBELLIS.